name is Jason JROCK Houston, and you're listening to This Is Metal. And we'll be talking with my regular host tonight, Joe Lawson, the lead singer from DragonLore and Scream Kings. And before we get started, Joe, I'd like to let the people know what's going on with you. I was reading on your website that both your bands are kind of taking time off because of the current COVID-19 situation. Is that correct?
Yeah. Along with everything that's going on, there's some other personal things that are happening amongst some of the musicians and guys in the band, and so things are just kind of put on hold right now. It's unfortunate. I don't like doing that, but sometimes that's part of being in a band.
Yeah. Well, we got this to keep us busy in the meantime, and hopefully that'll give you some more time to write some great songs for the future. Now. Today, to let people know what we're going to be talking about is all things Ronnie James Dio. And part of the reason I decided to do that is not only is he a great fan of all his work, but as I'm sure you are, Joe, but
absolutely.
2020 marks, oddly enough, the 10th anniversary of Ronnie's death, which, I mean, can you believe he's been gone that long even?
It seems crazy because I always wanted to see Dio live, and I didn't get to the end of his career, really, when I saw him on the Masters of Metal tour with Heaven and Hell.
Wow.
Which was a great tour and a great concert. And he stole the show. He really did. He just came out there with such a commanding presence, and his voice was so powerful and just so on. It made the hair on my neck stand up.
Yeah.
It was just so inspiring.
Yeah,
and then to find out later, here's this guy dying of stomach cancer, and he's just up there just giving it everything he's got, and he sounds fantastic. It's just most singers and most musicians today. If that was them, they wouldn't even be on. They would just cancel the shows.
And I'll say this: a testament to Ronnie, is this. I had no idea he was as old as he was. I recently was reading if he was still alive, he'd be like 79 years old. So going back 10 years ago, he would have been 69, turning 70, and he did not look that old. So up until then, I guess he took care of himself. And somebody was saying, reason Ronnie he probably would still be alive if he'd gone to the doctor more regularly, but because he was constantly on the road. He's like, I'm all right. And then I guess he started getting sick, and unfortunately, by the time they discovered the cancer was too late, it spread throughout his body. But I'd like to hear, Joe, what's the story of how you first became a Dio fan? Was it through Rainbow? Was it first Sabbath, Dio? How did what was the time frame when you first became a Dio fan?
Well, for me, the introduction to Dio was the Last in Line album. Around that time frame when that came out, it was like, wow, this is unbelievable. This is amazing. And and I thought about this for a couple of days. That we discussed we were going to talk about Dio and go in depth with him a little bit. And I thought to myself, what can I possibly say or add or contribute that hasn't been said about Dio already? And I came up with two things.
Okay.
I'll share those with you. Number one, the first thing I came up with was, just from myself personally, from my heart. He's one of my biggest influences.
Okay.
So lyrically, his stage presence, his voice, and the way that he commands your attention and captivates an audience and has them eaten out of his hand, and just everything about him was just so inspiring, so amazing, even to the point of the way he treated his fans. The way he respected people, the way he always took time to talk to people, sign autographs, and thank them for coming, and all of that stuff. He was always like that. I don't think I've ever heard a story about Dio being an asshole to somebody that didn't deserve it.
Yeah, again, I've never met the man personally. I just was a fan of his music, but I will tell you this. I've heard people tell similar stories like that. We have a mutual friend, Sean Peck, of course, the lead singer from Death Dealer and Cage.
Great guy, yeah.
And he was telling me, back in the day, Cage actually opened up for Dio. I forget what tour it was, but he was telling me, after the tour ended, it was a few years between, since he had last seen Ronnie, and Ronnie said, "Hey, you're Sean Peck from Cage. What's up, Sean?" And he's like, that's the thing about Ronnie. Once he met you, he made a point of learning everybody's name and he never forgot a person's name, and that's just, I mean, if you stop and think, a guy like Ronnie James Dio, how many people?
Thousands of people, probably all the time. Yeah, of course.
He must have encountered in his lifetime, and to just meet somebody a couple times and be able to remember their name, and I mean that's a hard thing for anybody to do,
Right. Yeah, he was a true spirit, man. I mean, there will never be another Ronnie James Dio. And to me, there won't be.
And I even heard stories about the guitar player from Dio that replaced Vivian Campbell, Craig Goldie. When he previously met Ronnie when Ronnie was producing Craig's previous band, Rough Cut, and I guess when Craig first joined up with Dio, he didn't have a lot of money. There are stories that Craig Goldie was homeless at the time, and Ronnie and his wife Wendy took him in, and they said, you're going to stay with us until you get on your feet. And not that he was a charity case or anything, but they helped the guy out, and
sure.
And then I even remember reading an interview that Ronnie had done, and he'd been talking about, not that he was bragging or anything, just saying, the tour bus, we were leaving an arena recently, and it was pouring down rain, and I seen this guy just stand out in the rain, and I pulled over and I asked him, hey, are you all right? And he's like, oh, I'm kind of stuck here. I need a ride, and I need a ride somewhere. I waited for my ride. They never showed up, and Ronnie was like, told the driver, find out where he's going, and we're gonna take him there, And guys of that caliber just do not typically do stuff like that. I mean, that's just the kind of guy he was.
Yeah, that speaks volumes of his character. That's just, that just makes me love him even more. That's just the kind of person that he was. The work that he did with the Throwaway Children Foundation, I think it was called, that he did, that he had for
Children of the Night.
Stuff like that. Children of the Night.
Yeah.
I mean, just stuff like that. I mean, he didn't have to do any of that kind of stuff. And I mean, he did that out of his heart, the goodness of his heart, man.
Yeah.
The guy was genuine. He was a rare person, man.
Yeah,
very rare.
And I'll tell you another thing about Ronnie James Dio, as far as my personal story of how I became a Dio fan. For me,
please do.
For me, the album was Heaven and Hell, of course, Black Sabbath, and the song for me, the very first song I heard Black Sabbath do with Dio was Neon Nights. At the time, that was all over the radio.
Excellent.
And that was my first impression. And if I don't know if you remember at the time, Joe, but when Ronnie James Dio first joined up with Sabbath, before anybody knew, who the new singer was, a lot of people were predicting, Sabbath is over. Sabbath is never gonna they're never gonna have any kind of success without Ozzy Osbourne. And actually, they went on to have bigger and greater success. And part of a reason for that is a lot of people may fail to realize that the bass player Geezer Butler, he wrote most of those classic Black Sabbath songs, and Tony Iommi, not Ozzy. They kind of split the songwriting royalty, but it was just two guys. Even Ozzy's solo band, although it's his solo band, so of course he gets a huge chunk of the songwriting royalties. He doesn't really take part in the songwriting. It's the other band members, and so Ozzy Osbourne surrounds himself with very talented players. But like But like I seen you, Joe, with one of your fans on your fan page discussing this, and you were talking with this guy saying, about Dio's lyrics. He said, that's what I fell in love with first time I heard like the Heaven and Hell stuff, because I mean, he was such a great songwriter as far as the lyrics. I mean, you could just see the imagery. Like he sang about demons and wizards and dragons, and he took you like into another world. And it's like when Ronnie James Dio came aboard into Sabbath, I mean, he really took the band to the next level.
Oh yeah, undeniably so. And I mean, that's no dig at Ozzy.
No.
Because I love Ozzy, and all the stuff that Sabbath did with Ozzy was great too. But for me, it's just a special place in my heart for sure, man. Like I said, he's one of my biggest influences, and there'll never be another Ronnie James Dio, But at least we have a lot of great, amazing music that he shared with us. Another album I thought that was underrated that I really loved that he did was Black Sabbath, Dehumanizer. Yeah,
and that's an interesting time in the band's history, because that's back in 1992 when Dio got back with Sabbath at the time, And that was right after the movie Wayne's World come out, and they had a song called Time Machine on the soundtrack. And
Right.
and it was a pretty decent album as far as being a comeback album, because right before that, Sabbath, the reason they got back with Dio, they had this other singer, Tony Martin, a very decent singer in his own right, but a very different sounding Black Sabbath, and the albums weren't really selling that well. So they said, maybe we should try to get back with Ronnie. And from what I understand, Geezer Butler he went backstage at a Dio concert, and he said, hey man, we should get Sabbath back together. And that's how that all came about, kind of. And once they put out the Dehumanizer album, they started touring, and then Los Angeles, California, they were going to do a show in Los Angeles where, just kind of think about this. Ronnie James Dio has just returned to Black Sabbath, and then Tony and Geezer wanted to open up for their original lead singer's solo show and as the opening act, and Dio's like, what are we doing here? This is supposed to be our big moment and we're going to open for the guy I replaced? I don't think so. And it became such an issue that Ronnie kind of left the tour after that. He just went on and he reformed Dio, and you really can't blame him. I remember that particular show.
No, that's kind of underhanded.
Yeah.
That was a bitter point for him,
Yeah.
And rightfully so. I mean, that would be awkward and uncomfortable, and I see his point there completely. Yeah.
And then what's funny is the band kind of said, okay, well, Ronnie, if you're gonna leave and not show up, we'll just our good old pal Rob Halford from Judas Priest, he can fill in for that night, and that's kind of what happened. And I was kind of surprised that Rob Halford would do it, like even just for one night, unless maybe he would have had the intention of saying, okay, I'll be the new singer in Black Sabbath. But again, a guy like Rob Halford, why would you leave Judas Priest to go to Black Sabbath?
Right. Yeah, of course not. Yeah. No, he was content with what he was doing. I think he did it more out of
friendship,
a friendship or a favor, to the good guys in Sabbath, So.
And then go on. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that, but yeah, there's just, so many great classic albums. The Last in Line, Holy Diver, all the stuff he did with Rainbow, the stuff he did with Sabbath, and then he came back and reformed Sabbath basically under the name Heaven and Hell.
Yeah, now what do you think about that?
That was amazing, Now,
what do you think about that? Because I got to tell you, I realized it was done after they got back with Ozzy, and Ozzy was kind of, putting his foot down, him and Sharon, like, well, you're not going to call it Black Sabbath with, Dio, which I didn't really get, I guess. They wanted to all have kind of ownership, I guess, in the name again. But so I could see as a business standpoint. But I got to tell you, as a fan, I still call it Black Sabbath,
I think a lot of people thought of it that way, I mean, when you're to a point like that, I can only imagine. But, all those guys that participated in that, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Vinny, and Ronnie, I mean, they're all very well-established, known names.
Yeah.
I mean, so they could have called the band Turd Quest, and it would have been amazing, and it would have done just fine. I mean, so there's only, to make my point, there's only so much to a name.
Yeah.
I mean, what matters is what you're delivering, and they delivered the goods and then some.
Yeah, and I will say this, as far as like the last time I seen Dio in concert was with Heaven and Hell, and it's for anybody who's never seen Ronnie James Dio perform live, can't do it, of course, obviously anymore, but I urge them to at least go check out some of the stuff you might find on YouTube, like as far as live performances, because what really stood out to me about seeing Ronnie that night, I don't know if people are aware of just what a tiny guy he was, but I mean, I was kind of in the back of arena, like outdoor arena, kind of up in the rafters, but so you're looking and this little tiny guy up on stage, and then when you listen to the powerhouse voice the guy had, and this little guy had this powerhouse of a voice, it just was so amazing.
Yeah, that just made it even more amazing. Right? It did. I mean, seeing them live, that's the first thing you can't help but think. It's like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It just blows your mind. Blows you away.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. And somebody else I'd like to give credit to as far as Dio goes is Doug Aldrich.
Oh yeah,
that dude is an amazing guitar player.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think he ended up writing a whole lot of stuff. I think there was 2 tracks that he contributed to on Killing the Dragon album, and I don't know, too much far past that point, but I seen the DVD of them on the Killing the Dragon tour, and they're playing songs from Rainbow and songs from Dio's earlier career, and a variety of stuff as always, and what would be expected, and he does a phenomenal job of covering Vivian's stuff, Craig Goldie's stuff, the stuff he wrote. I mean, I was really impressed with how good of a guitar player and how good of a performance that guy delivered. I mean, he sounded amazing with Dio. I mean, he really did. Yeah,
I think, Ronnie had a lot of respect for Doug Aldrich. I think, unfortunately, what happened, like a lot of players like Doug Aldrich, at that time, right after that tour ended, he got the opportunity to join Whitesnake, and I don't know, maybe it was more money, a bit higher paying gig, who knows? But you get these offers, and you got to decide, okay, what am I going to do? And I don't think Dio ever lost any kind of respect for Doug Aldrich. It's like, maybe this is a better gig, or maybe, I don't know what the situation was. But, and one thing, after Aldrich joined Whitesnake, I will tell you, he was like David Coverdale's right-hand man in that band. He wrote, forget about what a great guitar player the guy is. I mean, he's also a great songwriter. I mean, if you look at any of the stuff he wrote with Coverdale and Whitesnake, I mean, it's great stuff.
The guy's phenomenal musician, and then some. But I was really impressed with that performance that I saw, and I thought, man, wow, Dio got an amazing guitar player. This guy is just nailing all of the stuff, the old stuff, the new stuff, and the in-between stuff. And so that was pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, while we're on the subject of Doug Aldrich, I got to tell you, I love the band he's currently with, the Dead Daisies. Unfortunately, the album they've been ready to release, I understand it's been delayed until next year, unfortunately, but the Dead Daisies no longer has John Corabi, but they got the legendary Mr. Glenn Hughes on lead vocals now, so that is definitely something I'm going to want to check out when it's ready to come out.
Right on. Cool, for sure.
Yeah,
but going back to Dio, my story is a little bit of a sad story with Dio, but I'll share it, and it goes like this. Early on in my musical journey, I was in a band called Blind Rage. Okay. And we were playing a show in Illinois, opening up for the Bullet Boys. Wow. And we played the show. Sweet little lady named Lou owned the club, and we played the show. And mind you, we were all young, between 19 and 21, so all of us were doing stupid shit.
Yeah.
A couple of the guys in the band got busted in the parking lot smoking a joint. Wow. So, by a security cop, and they made a big deal out of it, So it became this big stupid issue, and the club owner was really upset about it, and talked to our manager and told our manager that Dio was coming within the next month or two, and she was going to have us open for Dio. Wow. Until this incident, and so it ruined an amazing opportunity for us. And to add salt to the wound, this particular performance, it was a band called My Dying Bride. Oh, wow. Now My Dying Bride played that show, opening for Dio, and based on that show, Ronnie took that band with him overseas and helped launch their career. Oh, how amazing is that? Wow. And Joe, the other thing that's kind of interesting about that story is you look at how different the politics of the world are today. I mean, you've actually, the way the world is today, we have politicians fighting to legalize drugs. We got politicians, we want to make weed legal so people can get it. And different world back then. Yeah, and let's not fool ourselves. It's not because they really want to do it. It's like, we want to pander to as many people as we can so we can get votes. They want votes and they want money. That's what that's always about. It's a dog and pony show. Oh yeah. And everybody knows it by now. And see, getting back to Dehumanizer, I will say I think that is also a very it's one of those albums very underrated. But I think the way the band kind of
got back together and fell apart so quickly. That's part of the reason for that. But one of the tracks I really loved on there was TV Crimes.
Yeah, that whole album, front to back, I love every song.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but to me, I remember listening to it when it first came out, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But years later, I think some people weren't ready to hear something that heavy.
Yeah.
You know, from Black Sabbath, you know, and from Dio. I mean, it really was one of the heaviest things that Dio ever put out. I mean, that sucker is just like massive, and it's dark, and it's heavy, and it just has teeth, man. I mean, it's like a creature coming out of the dark at you. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, that album was just amazing. And you know, I think to some extent, maybe people weren't quite ready for that back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, I remember when they were recording that album. At first, it was rumored that that Cozy Powell was going to be doing the drums because he had worked with Ronnie and Rainbow, and he'd also played on a couple other Black Sabbath albums throughout their career, and there was rumors that Ronnie and him didn't get along. I don't know if that's true. And then the story started going, Cozy Powell, he fell off a horse, he hurt his back. And then they got Vinny back in the band, but I kind of think, I mean, I would have been interested to see Cozy Powell in Black Sabbath, but I think Vinny and Ronnie in Black Sabbath makes more sense to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a powerhouse combination. I mean, they put out a lot of great music together. I mean, obviously. I mean, all you got to do is listen to a few of the songs, and you can hear the magic. I mean, for yourself.
Yeah, and even so much to the point that, like recently, Carmine Appice, Vinny's older brother, and Vinny, they have this band called Appice, and they put together this like tribute song on their CD, and they did a video. I think it's for a song called Monster, but it's a tribute to Ronnie James Dio. And if you haven't had a chance, you can go on YouTube and check it out. But it's a very cool thing, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, undoubtedly one of the largest figures in hard rock and heavy metal. You know, I mean, it'll be a name that'll live forever. You know.
Yeah, and I got to ask you, Joe, as a Dio fan, because obviously a lot of people when they say Dio, they point to those first 3 Dio albums, like with Vivian Campbell. And they're decent albums, but like, what did you think of some of the later Dio albums? Like we were talking about Killing of a Dragon, you know, there's Angry Machines, for example.
Magica.
Yeah, Magica. And they're supposed to...
I think those are great albums, and they all had good songs on them. And there's not a single album I think that Dio did that's bad. That's just my personal opinion, you know. So there's albums that I like better, or that I thought were stronger, you know. I mean, you can't go wrong with those classic albums like Last in Line and Holy Diver. I mean, Holy Diver, one of the things that blow me away about Holy Diver is that it's strange because everything just worked the way that it did. And what I mean by that is the production on it was, you know, from the 80s, and I mean, ancient time, you know, I mean, it was a long time ago, and it still sounds so fresh. It still sounds so damn good. I mean, it was just an amazing time frame, and you know, that record really stood out. I mean, the production on it is just unbelievable, stellar, even today. According to today's standards, with all the technology we have, all the crap we have, that album still stands right up there. And
you got to think, by the time he got to forming the Dio band, which is basically Ronnie James Dio's solo band, you know, think about the freedom he finally had. I mean, when people really, for the very first time, took notice of Ronnie James Dio, of course, Rainbow, but that was Ritchie Blackmore's band, you know, that he formed after Deep Purple, and so of course Ronnie was a big part of that band, but Ritchie Blackmore, he kind of controlled everything, and it's a very interesting thing, because I think Ritchie Blackmore, like everybody he's ever worked with, you know, very talented guy, but and him and Ronnie seem to have a great chemistry, but personally I understand they could not stand one another, especially Ronnie. He was like, even up until, you know, Ronnie died, he's like, I would never step on foot with Ritchie Blackmore again.
Right.
We made beautiful music together, but he said Ritchie's just he's an awful human being. Like he would say how he treated the keyboard player awful, and he's like, you know, very talented guy, but I'd never want to play with him again.
Right. Yeah, that's sad, you know, and there are a lot of musicians out there that are just, you know, a train wreck of a person. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. You know, they're difficult people to get along with. I've been fighting that battle for 30 years. So,
and then of course
I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, and then of course by the time he got to Sabbath, a different situation because he became friends with the guys. You know, even though eventually they kind of went their separate ways when they put out that live album. Ronnie would say that he'd catch Geezer and Tony going back in the studio when he wasn't there and trying to mix it differently and stuff like that.
Right.
But there was at least, even up until the time Ronnie died, he'd always say, no matter if there's ever been any tension or friction between me and the guys in Sabbath, we remained friends. We continued to have a certain level of respect for each other so that we could work together.
Right.
And then that's why I think by the time he formed a Dio band, could you imagine? Oh, okay, this is my band. I don't have to get permission. I can write whatever style of music I want. This is my baby. Just think the freedom. He had with that, and that's why I think, especially the first two Dio albums, Last in Line and Holy Diver. I think that's why he was able to do something like Rainbow in the Dark and get a little more poppy and commercial with some of the stuff, but still have that heaviness and that metal element to what he did.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, Dio was something else about Dio. I mean, you hear that guy's voice, and for the rest of your life, when you hear him sing, it could be "Row, Row Your Boat" or I don't care what.
Yeah.
As soon as you hear that voice, you know it's him. He has that thumbprint. He has that uniqueness. He has that identity that is only him.
Yeah.
And he don't sound like anyone else. He definitely has his own identifiable sound.
Yeah, and Ronnie James Dio is interesting in that he's an American singer, American player, but like a lot of the musicians he played with were European players. Like even Vivian Campbell, for example. He's originally from Ireland. I don't know how they found him, but I mean, just a great unknown gunslinger like that he discovers. Jimmy Bain, a bass player he played with in Rainbow, he brought him into Dio. And then eventually they brought this guy, Claude Snell. He was a keyboard player. But he played with all of these super talented guys. And Ronnie, as great of a musician he was in his own right, he was not, he had no trouble, like, shining a light on the other band members,
because he knew how to show people respect and how to get the best out of people, and if he wanted it to be successful, it's just like it's simple. It's like the golden rule. I mean, treat people how you want to be treated, and a lot of times if you do, you're going to get a lot farther. Your band's going to be more successful, your life, your marriage, everything.
Yeah, and again, you and me are talking about Dio tonight from a fan perspective, because we never knew the man personally. We just know what we read and his music and how much we enjoyed it. But I got to ask you, what do you think of Vivian Campbell as far as a guitar player and the way he split with Dio? I mean, by the time him and Dio kind of split, they'd said some vile, hateful things, and
it was an ugly split, initially when all of that happened, and they both threw some rocks at each other, kind of verbally, but I don't know, but from what I'm told, they kind of patched that up and, moved on. I mean, they weren't bosom buddies and best friends, really, but they moved on, and they both said what they had to say, and, they both went on to do whatever, successful careers in some respect. Vivian obviously with Def Leppard, and Dio kept going, doing his thing, so, but as far as his guitar playing, I mean, magical, awesome, I mean, amazing. I mean, like I said, those first couple of Dio records, I mean, it's just, what a great tone, I mean, great sound, and just, a real emotional player, and just really, he helped create what would become known as that Dio sound. He really did. And albums later and other guitar players came in, but it was Vivian that kind of helped establish that sound.
Yeah, and I will say this again: we're just talking as fans, and we just know what we read in the magazines and stuff back in the day. And he even, oddly enough, Dio was a successful enough solo artist that especially with Last in Line and Holy Diver, when those albums came out, those videos were all over MTV. I mean,
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
just-
I mean, those are some of the things that made him a huge name. Like you mentioned,
Yeah,
"Rainbow in the Dark," "Man on the Silver Mountain."
Yeah.
You know, songs like that today are still played all over the radio. I mean, he got a lot of mileage out of that stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Killing the Dragon record in the USA barely broke the top 200.
Yeah.
You know, but again, you know, like I said, different times.
Yeah.
You know, things were changing, and you know, to some extent, true metal and good metal has always been underground.
Yeah.
And it's the fans that appreciate it, and it means a lot to the metal fans. You know, most of us really don't give a shit what critics think.
Yeah, and you know, so by the time they got to the third Dio album, which was Sacred Heart, a lot of people did not like it as much as the first Dio album. They felt maybe it was more commercial, maybe more radio oriented. What was your feelings when that album came out, the Sacred Heart album?
You know, that's one of those records to me. You know, there's songs on it that I like, and there's songs on it that I'm just kind of like, they're mediocre. But
Yeah.
I still don't think that there's anything on the Sacred Heart album that's terrible.
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah.
that's bad.
Yeah.
I've never heard him do anything that to me that sounds bad. Nothing.
Yeah, and you know, again, we're just talking as fans here, but it's interesting because I gotta tell you, I'm a huge Vivian Campbell fan as far as his playing, and I remember because of the way, even years after he left and he had success with Def Leppard, I mean, he just for years totally denied, like he's all that. I hate the stuff I did with Dio. It sucks. I'm never gonna play that music again. And then I don't know if he just realized, hey, you know, why are you so bitter? Or maybe even after Ronnie died, maybe he realized, hey, this is part of my legacy. He started getting to the point where he wanted to play the music again. He formed his band Last in Line, and he's like, when we first started out, it was kind of like the Dio disciples, in that, you know, we're gonna play Dio songs, but it's just gonna be out the first 3 albums that I played on. It's gonna be me, Jimmy Bain, and and Vinny, and we're gonna get some other guys to come in, and then they got to a point where let's go do an album of original music, and it's kind of morphed into kind of an original band, which is a pretty cool thing to kind of keep the legacy of that going. But as far as Last in Line, the band with Andrew Freeman and Vinny Peace and Vivian Campbell, how big a fan are you of what they're doing these days?
Well, honestly, I'm not totally familiar with it.
Yeah.
I heard a couple of tracks. I really liked them. I thought they were good.
Yeah.
And you know, I wish that they would have I wish they would have been able to come out with that, you know, 10 years sooner.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think they would have got a lot more mileage out of it. You know, but it is what it is. And like I said, what I heard of it, I thought sounded really good, and it was really cool. But another good Dio record, though, they talked about much, is Master of the Moon.
Oh yes, yes.
Master of the Moon was really good, a really good record with Craig Goldie on guitar, Simon Wright on drums, of course, and they had Jeff Pilson, bassist, with them on that album. That was I thought that was a pretty good album with some great tunes on it as well.
And you know, in a couple of those 90s Dio records, another guy they had involved was this very underrated guitar player, Tracy G, and he played on like Angry Machines and Strange Highways, and like Strange Highways was a very interesting album because that was probably the most Sabbathy sounding thing Dio had done in years. But if you haven't got a chance to check out Strange Highways, that's also another one with Jeff Pilson that I really strongly urge you check out.
Oh yeah, some great stuff on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm at least familiar with every record.
Yeah.
That guy's done. You know.
Yeah.
Like I said, again, a huge fan and huge influence on me.
Yeah.
Made a major impact on me as a lyricist, a songwriter, a performer. I mean, he set the bar really high. You know.
Yeah, and you know, even going back to when right after Dio left Black Sabbath, after they did the Dehumanizer tour, and he got back with Dio, and they put out that Lock Up the Wolves album, and that was the one and only album. He got this like 17-year-old whiz kid from Europe named Rowan Robertson, and
right.
And I mean, he was supposed to be like really influenced by like Ritchie Blackmore, and he just did the one album, but man, what an you know, again, Ronnie just had an eye for talent like that. He brought this kid 17 or 18 years old, over to the United States, and gave him an opportunity to play on a Dio album.
Right. It's crazy, but right. I mean, he could find them. I mean, that's for sure, no doubt about it. He's had some amazing musicians. That he surrounds himself with all the time.
And I'll tell people in regards to Rowan Robertson, he's been in a couple of these bands in Hollywood. He lives here, and he's lived here for several years now. He was in a band called DC4 with Matt and Sean Duncan. And if you go on Rowan Robertson's page, I seen recently advertising on Facebook that he'll give people like I think YouTube guitar lessons on how to play any of the songs off like the Dio album that he did, which was Lock Up the Woods. I mean, so he did just the one album, but he's telling people now, hey, you want to learn how to play these Dio songs that I played on? I'll teach you. I mean, how cool is that?
Absolutely. I mean, why would you not?
Yeah. I mean, and then getting back to Simon Wright now, he's an amazing musician as far as a drummer. I mean, I don't know if people even realize, but Simon was at one point before he played with Dio, he was in AC/DC. Just he's an incredible player, and I understand him and he lived with Ronnie and his wife Wendy, and he was very close with them up until the very end.
Yep, absolutely. And from what I've heard, he's an outstanding, very sincere, very passionate, very good guy. Yeah,
and just to let people know, the next episode we record for this, we're going to be talking about Tim Ripper Owens, and he fits into this conversation because Tim Ripper Owens, as most people know, he's the guy that replaced Rob Halford and Judas Priest. Did 2 great studio albums with them, a couple live albums. But anyways, the reason he's coming up in this conversation is he was managed by Ronnie's wife, Wendy, and him and Ronnie were pretty good friends over the years, so much that Tim Owens, along with Oni Logan, the singer from Lynch Mob, they're the 2 lead singers for the Dio Disciples. Anybody that doesn't know that? Dio Disciples basically kind of like the final Dio band that and a few extra musicians that were friends of Ronnie's. From time to time, they'll get together and they will perform, Dio music, kind of to keep the legacy of Ronnie James Dio alive. And they're supposed to be kind of like Vivian Campbell did with Last in Line, putting together an album of original material. But I remember a few years ago at Disneyland in Anaheim, California, seeing the Dio Disciples with Tim Ripper Owens, Noni Logan. They trade off on lead vocals, and it's just an amazing thing to see because you think, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull this off, but when you think it's the last group of guys that actually played with Ronnie, people that knew Ronnie, of course they're up there because as a musician, you're trying to make a living, but these guys, I don't know if they're getting paid or not, but they're doing it for the love of Ronnie because he was their friend. They're trying to keep his legacy alive, if you will. And
right. Tim said, that he's not trying to replace Ronnie, or he's not trying to sound just like Ronnie or be Ronnie. He's celebrating Ronnie.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I never seen anything like it. I'll never forget it to this day because when I was at the concert, it's this little tiny like House of Blues club, but it was like the electric church. People were all up on their feet. The band and the audience were one. We were all singing these songs in the love for Ronnie, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And see, like Tim Ripper Owens, he is a huge talent. Like I said, a lot of people know him because he played with Judas Priest. That's what he's mainly known for. He did a lot of these. He's featured on a lot of these great tribute records that have been put out over the years. He played with Yngwie Malmsteen, I think, for like 2 albums. He was briefly with another great band, like I seen you talking about on your page, Joe, was Iced Earth. So he's one of these guys that he's hugely talented, and I can't believe, I guess it's because he's involved with all these different projects, that he's only put out 1 solo album to date.
Right. Well, we better save a little bit to talk about if we're going to talk about him on the next run.
Oh yeah. Well, I wanted to bring him up because he does have that Dio connection, And
absolutely, big time.
Yeah, and these later Dio albums that came out, it's kind of interesting because, like I said, a lot of people when they think of Dio, they think of those first 3 albums for whatever reason. But that's kind of what people refer to as a classic Dio. And
and that's what I was talking about. Yeah. That's what I mean. Vivian helped establish that, and not to discredit Dio or anyone else, of course not. But that's part of what made and encompassed that sound, and you know that the inspiration that Ronnie felt too. I mean, I'm sure that they fed off each other. You know, I mean, if he heard those riffs, and I mean, you know, vice versa. You know, I'm sure they worked hand in hand to some degree. You know, and it was beautiful, and it was magical. You know.
Yeah, and like you said, as a fan of Dio, I'm a fan of everything he did, even those later albums, those later Dio albums. And what's interesting is shortly after, I forget, I have to look it up, but there was a greatest hits album that they released shortly after Ronnie had passed. They'd taken stuff off the later Dio albums. And unless you're a diehard fan like me and you've heard this stuff before, it's almost like getting a new Dio album, because a lot of these songs were kind of on later albums. They were not as big of hits. They were not played on the radio. Like a lot of the earlier classic stuff. So a lot of people are also discovering this stuff even just now in 2020, because even a lot of the later Dio albums are being, like, you could go on Amazon and you can find some of these albums. I think like Magic is one of them. They're reissuing them with like a bonus cuts, and it's kind of a cool thing, you know, for fans to get to check it out a second time.
Absolutely. I mean, if you never got the original album from back then, first off, shame on you. Second off, I mean, it's a great chance to get introduced. Never heard it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's almost like getting a new Dio album if you haven't heard any of his stuff before, and it really does not disappoint. And I will say this: I seen you were talking. There's this guy on your fan page. I'm going to mention his name, Dave Hilligens, and he was saying that how for him, the Dio album was The Mob Rules. Another great album that kind of
absolutely,
that gets kind of overshadowed by Heaven and Hell. Okay, but it definitely, especially the title track. I mean, if you're gonna talk Mob Rules, I love that track. Now, I think when Ronnie was singing the Mob Rules, I think he's more like singing about, you know, the real mob and the mafia. But even the Mob Rules is kind of interesting, that song and that album, because what is going on politically in the world today? You have all this defund the police, people out in the street rioting, and for whatever reason, you know, and people on two different sides. And a lot of these politicians, like, I live here in LA, I'm sorry to say this, I don't know where you stand politically, but the mayor in LA, very weak leadership. I mean, he was out there giving a speech one day when people were rioting and burning police cars and everything, and he's like telling all these rioters, he's like, he gets on TV and he starts crying, "I don't want to take away your First Amendment right. Please stand back. I'll take a knee with you."
To put it quite frankly in a nutshell, and make it quick and simple, where I stand politically is I think most of these people should be drug out and put in front of a firing squad and shot in the head.
Yeah. And the only reason I bring this up is because, again, we're talking about the song Mob Rules, and I know what he maybe originally wrote the song about, but it is so interesting that all these years later, that it's got some kind of current event taking place in the world. This song is still relevant, you know, all these years later.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, to me, all of the songs are relevant.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, everything from the old stuff that he did to the newer stuff, and all of it, to me, stands true today, too.
Yeah, you know? And you know, an interesting thing, we're talking about the music of Ronnie James Dio. Okay, we're talking about, well, I'm not too familiar with it, but we're talking about everything from the band Elf to Rainbow to Black Sabbath to Dio, and somehow it all comes out as Ronnie James Dio music. I'll give you a perfect example now. When you hear the song "Man on the Silver Mountain," do you think of it more of a Ronnie James Dio song or a Rainbow song? Let's be honest now.
Well, yeah, to me, like, you hit a good point there. I mean, you can't help but hear Dio's voice. Yeah. And if you didn't know any better, you'd say, "Oh, that's a Dio song." You know, I think some people probably do, actually.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's kind of,
they just they hear that identifiable voice, and that's what they love, or that's what they remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, interesting story with that is "Man on the Silver Mountain." That's one of those songs too. Now, while I did not think it was a Black Sabbath song, I thought once upon a time I did think it was a Dio song, and then I learned, oh no, that was from this other band he was in, Rainbow. But again, because the voice is so identifiable, but anything from Rainbow to Sabbath, like you said, if you know Ronnie James, the song was written by Ronnie James Dio, you can feel the lyrics. I mean, that's one thing, his voice and his songwriting. That's what I always remember about Ronnie James Dio, because the lyrics, they come alive. I mean, it's...
Oh, they do. They paint a picture. I mean, like you said, like you mentioned earlier, it's like he takes you away to this magical
journey, yeah,
outer realm, outer universe.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he literally transcends you in the midst of the song. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's any song that he was ever involved with. And I will tell you, I don't know if you ever got a chance to hear. They put out this great Dio tribute. Wendy Dio was very involved with it after Ronnie died. But for example, there is a like Anthrax does a great. If you haven't heard it, you go on YouTube later. But like Anthrax does a great version of Neon Nights. Rob Halford kind of does a solo version of Man on the Silver Mountain, and they do a decent job of covering this stuff. But I mean, and kind of making it their own, but still staying true to the original sound of a song. But like Rob Halford, if you never heard him doing Man on the Silver Mountain, I mean, he just nailed it. Yeah. And see, that's the thing. Ronnie James Dio, like you said, anybody that talks about the man, they just talk about what not even just a huge talent he was, but just a great human being.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's rare to find somebody with that level of talent that's not an asshole.
Yeah. And you know, just amazing guy. Now, if you had to pick, Joe, very hard, but like I guess, would you say you're equally as big of a Rainbow fan as you are a Sabbath or even a Dio fan?
Well, no. To be honest with you, I would say. I mean, I'd hate to put it in an order just because there's songs that he's done with Rainbow that I love, like Gates of Babylon. I mean, one of my favorites, you know, so amazing, so awesome.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then there's stuff that he's done with his solo career and his own records and Black Sabbath and... I love it all, you know, but...
the cool thing I thought about Ronnie is...
I wasn't really much of a Rainbow fan when Dio wasn't in the band, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's another interesting point because, like, when I refer to Rainbow, let's be honest, most of my favorite stuff is the Ronnie stuff. I mean, and I think part of a reason Rainbow, even though I had Richie Blackmore, I think part of a reason Rainbow was never... even at the level of the same success that like Sabbath had was because Richie was constantly changing singers. I mean, yeah, you had great singers like Graham Bonnet and Joe Lynn Turner, but is a constant revolving door of singers, and so that makes it very difficult for a band to kind of have an established, kind of a little bit of established sound if you're always changing the singer, you know.
Right, exactly, yeah. And you know, I mean, I was never in a band with the guy, so I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I can only trust what Ronnie was saying, you know, and if Blackmore was that hard of a guy to get along with and work with, that's another big reason, you know. I mean, if you're that difficult of a person to get along with, well, you're probably going to have limited success to some degree.
Yeah, and you know, even today, all these years later, Richie Blackmore. He's old. He's, you know, like a lot of these guys. He's getting up there in age. He really doesn't have to do anything if he never, you know, he could live off his millions of whatever he made over the years with Deep Purple. But even the Deep Purple guys, I mean, Richie Blackmore. I mean, he's one of those guys that, you know, a lot of the guys in his band he did not get along with as far as Deep Purple. Like I guess the one guy he got along with was John Lord, but like especially him and Ian Gillan, they had a real hatred for one another, and Richie just one day, him and Gillan got into an argument on stage. He walked off the stage and never came back.
Well, that's sad because Ian Gillan was a huge, amazing talent. And, you know, that's another singer, another band. You know, when you see the original videos of their performance, I don't know if it was at the BBC or exactly where it was, but it was old. You can tell, you know. And when they did "Child in Time," and they were doing that in front of an audience, you could tell by the reaction of the audience. Nobody had ever heard anything like that before in their lives. They looked scared. I mean, it's kind of comical. They're in such shock they don't know whether to clap or get up and run out of the building out of fear. I mean, it was a strange reaction from the audience, because I think they were just so shocked and stunned that nobody had ever heard anything like that,
Yeah, Deep Purple, we're going to have to do an episode on them one day because they're one of my all-time favorites, and they, like, the band, with Roger Glover, Blackmore, Ian Gillan, Ian Pace, and John Lord, they were like, back in the day, they were the ultimate jam band. I mean, you go see Deep Purple in concert, and I got to say, man, they would jam on one song for 30 minutes, but you were definitely not going to hear it being played like it was on the record if you went to see Deep Purple in concert,
Right. Yeah. Which is cool, man. I like that, and I like a lot of the stuff they've done, and that's definitely, that era, and a lot of those musicians are definitely within the Dio camp, Dio definitely worked with a lot of those people, too. So even down to Roger Glover and Rainbow. A lot of these bands kind of have their connections on the same family tree, so to speak. But I just got to say, long live. Oh, that's another one. Long live rock and roll. But again, that's one of those songs when I hear it, I don't. Oddly enough, I don't think of it as a Rainbow song. I think of it as a Ronnie James Dio song because his voice and his sound is all over it. And exactly.
And that's the interesting thing is playing with these different bands, but he's still kind of got the Ronnie sound all through them. And I dug the fact that when he did go solo with the Dio band, but he's like, I'm going to play stuff from not just Dio, but throughout my entire career. I'm going to play the Rainbow stuff. I'm going to play Sabbath stuff, whatever I want to play. And it wasn't like, when Sammy Hagar joined Van Halen, we're not going to do any David Lee Roth tunes,
Right.
And so, you gotta admire that. And that's about, I guess, all I have to. That's kind of my story as far as being a Ronnie James Dio fan. Unless you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this up tonight.
Yeah, stand up and shout, baby.
Yeah, stand up and shout. Another great tune. See, I just there's so many great tunes that some of them kind of like that kind of slip from your mind. But yeah, that's another great tune there.
Absolutely.
And we rock. That's another one.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like a sea of never-ending awesome music.
Yeah, and I'll tell you before we wrap this up. I'll tell you another album that's just popped in my mind. That is kind of a unique album. There, a lot of people kind of it's one of those forgotten albums that people don't talk about too much. But the very first full-length studio album they did with Craig Goldie, Dream Evil. If you look, one of my favorite tracks is like the one that was single. If you could have been a dreamer. Again, just listen to those lyrics. I mean, it's kind of uplifting. It's very kind of like a song about hope and dreaming, talking about whatever your dreams are. Like dream, and very beautiful song, and
it is.
A lot of people kind of forget about it, but that's another album. If you forgot about it, go check it out.
Absolutely, man.
And well, that's our tribute to Ronnie James Dio, folks, and we'll be posting this soon, and we'll let you know when it goes up. And we encourage you to kind of continue to check out each show as we post it, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to send them our way or go on Joe Lawson's fan page and you can discuss what you think and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So thanks for being part of this and you've been listening to This Is Metal. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you.